So we already know that Bernie Sanders lost New York by about 16 points, but the thing that makes me really disappointed is that we'll never know how this state would have turned out if, one, it was an open primary, or two, if there just wasn't rampant voting fraud across the state. Now, there were a plethora of shenanigans that went on, just to name a few here. Exit polls were way off by about 11 points, when in actuality, it showed that Bernie Sanders only lost by about 5 points, and furthermore, polling stations were down in some areas in their entirety. There wasn't even one polling station that was working. Now, furthermore, at this point, we don't even know if provisional ballots are going to be counted. That is pending a court decision. So who knows at this point? And furthermore, the locations of polling places was switched at the last minute. Now, besides that, we have voter purging in Brooklyn. So according to Gothamist, 44,000 voters were inactive, 70,000 were removed from the inactive list, and 12,000 people had been moved out of the borough. So I'll get to why this was the case later on and give you an update on that. But now I want to give you an update on the situation just generally speaking. So as of now, it's official that the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, has officially launched an investigation. He states, "I am deeply troubled by the volume and consistency of voting irregularities, both in public reports and direct complaints to my office's voter hotline, which received more than 1,000 complaints in the course of the day yesterday. That's why today we have opened an investigation into alleged improprieties in yesterday's voting by the New York City Board of Elections. If necessary, we will initiate inquiries in additional areas of the state where voting irregularities appeared unusually high." Now, furthermore, according to the Huffington Post, New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer announced on Tuesday that he would audit the Board of Elections. Mayor Bill de Blasio described what had happened as a purge and said the errors indicated the board needs major reforms. Now, at face value, this may sound good, right? Well, if you're expecting impartiality, you're probably not going to get that, because Stringer here is a delegate for Hillary Clinton, who is going to be investigating fraud that disproportionately benefited Hillary Clinton. So, this is a joke. I don't know what the status is about the New York Attorney General, but I really hope that we can take him at his word that he actually is going to take this seriously. Now, the official who was actually guilty of purging the voters has been fired. So her name is Diane Haslett-Rudiano, and she was the Board of Elections chief clerk, and she was suspended, quote, without pay, effective immediately, pending an internal investigation into the administration of the voters' rolls in the borough of Brooklyn. Now, New York Daily News explains the problems began when she was trying to clean up the voting books, which must be periodically purged to eliminate people who die, move, or are ineligible for other reasons. Sources said she skipped one of the steps that was built in to stop the system from purging eligible voters, which caused a chain reaction that led to people being improperly removed. So, at this point, it seems as though we can chalk this up to incompetence, but at the same time, part of me wants to put on my tinfoil hat and think that maybe she had malicious intent, but who knows? Hopefully we'll get the full story once this investigation is released, but I'm honestly not too hopeful about that. Let's see what happens. We'll give it time, but by the time there's any conclusive results about what happened, it may be too late. So now that's just one portion of the problem with the New York primary and how that benefited Hillary Clinton more than Bernie Sanders, because the people who vote for Bernie Sanders, oftentimes they don't typically vote. So if turnout is high, Bernie Sanders is going to win. So if you suppress the vote, if turnout is suppressed or limited in any way, shape, or form, that's automatically going to hurt Bernie Sanders disproportionately. Now that's just one element, but the other element is the fact that they have this ridiculous closed primary system in New York. And I would argue that any closed primary is a form of voter suppression. When you are keeping people from exercising their democratic right to vote based on their registration, I'm sorry, but that is a form of voter suppression. That's my argument. You can disagree with it, but how can you argue otherwise? I don't know at this point. Now, the problem with New York is that independents have been restricted from changing their registration to Democrats so they can vote for Bernie Sanders since October. So if you're someone who didn't even know about Bernie Sanders back then, and you didn't know you wanted to vote for him, tough. And again, many independents voted with provisional ballots, and these may or may not be counted. It really depends on the outcome of the court case that's now pending. So again, this is an open question right now, but if it is the case that these are counted, that could change things dramatically. Now, furthermore, credit to Jimmy Dore for this point, but he brought up a really great point that I wanted to share with everyone. So New York has 3.2 million registered independents, and the vote difference between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton is less than 300,000 votes. So if it were the case that New York wasn't a closed primary and it were open, this election would have turned out completely different. And you could even predict that Bernie Sanders could have won by a landslide if New York didn't have this arbitrary closed voting rule. So in the end, yes, Hillary Clinton, you won New York. Kudos to you. Congratulations, I guess. But this isn't a win that you really want to be proud of. This is a win that happened due to election fraud and voter suppression. That's not something you boast about or be arrogant about like your campaign has been doing. That's something that you worry about, because if these type of shenanigans occur in November, if you are the nominee, guess who's going to be impacted? So the fact that Hillary Clinton and her supporters are not more worried about election fraud and voter suppression, it's honestly troubling, because up until this election, that was something that Democrats all worried about. It doesn't matter if you were a right-wing Democrat, if you were a progressive, everyone worried about these voter suppression tactics like voter ID laws and whatnot. But then we have these closed primaries and we have these election shenanigans going on where they cut polling places in certain areas. And I guess it's okay because it helps Hillary Clinton. Well, you have to be consistent. You have to call out the bad tactics that limit voting when you see it, because this is a democracy. So either you support democracy or you don't. That opinion of yours shouldn't vary based on the candidate that you're supporting and who it will or won't help. So that's all I got to see on this issue. I really hope that we actually get some good news out of this investigation, but I'm honestly not very hopeful at this point.